Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Anna Hajay from the National Fund. I'm joined here in our headquarters by my colleague, Canny. We are going to start in just a couple of minutes. We're waiting on a few more folks to log on, and then we'll go ahead and kick it off. Hello, everybody. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. So like I said, this is Anna Hajay with the National Fund. I want to welcome everybody today to this webinar that's going to be focused on work-based learning models in retail. We have an exciting lineup of presenters to talk about various aspects of apprenticeship in retail and adjacent service sectors. First, just a bit of housekeeping. You'll see the unmute button on the bottom left corner of your screen. If you're just using the phone and calling in, you can unmute yourself by pushing *6. So in case some of you are just on the phone, you can just push *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Next slide. So we have two great speakers with us here today. We have Paul Champion, who is the president and CEO of TranZed Apprenticeship Services. You'll see his bio up in a minute, but he has extensive experience in both the U.S. and abroad, and he started out as an apprentice engineer himself. In his current role at TranZed, Paul and his team are looking to increase the number of individuals who are gainfully employed in family-sustaining and lucrative careers through modern apprenticeship programs, a goal I think that we can all relate to. TranZed currently offers programs in tech and cyber industries, and they have registered apprenticeship programs in Maryland, DC, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. So Paul joins us today to talk about the UK apprenticeship models in retail and how they might translate to the US. Excuse me. We also have Tanille Smith, Director of Youth Programs for Skills for Chicagoland's Future. She's worked in areas from talent acquisition to project management and everything in between. And Tanille heads up the work with McDonald through their Best First Jobs initiative to provide a pipeline of opportunity youth in their management on-the-job training program. So I might have gotten that order incorrect, Tanille. I apologize if I did, but please feel free to correct me and let me know exactly how the two are interrelated. So during Paul's presentation, he's going to kick us off, but please feel free to send us any questions throughout the presentation via the chat function so that I can start to queue everything up for the Q&A section. So we'll have Paul's presentation, about 10 minutes for Q&A, and then we'll have Tanille and then some Q&A at the end. I also just want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, and we're going to send out both the deck and the recording on our community of practice, and it will also be on our collaborative resources page. In addition, if there's any questions that we don't get to, we can try to get those answered via email and incorporate them into what we provide a link to. So with that, I will pass it off to Paul.
Hi, thanks for that introduction. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm so pleased we don't have to go on. I haven't uncovered the video because that picture just looks so better than I look now. So that's why we've got that picture up there, which makes me look good. As you can tell from my accent, I would imagine you can tell that I'm based in Baltimore via the UK. As the introduction said, I've been involved in apprenticeships for a long time, both in the UK, Europe, Asia, Hong Kong, and China, and now developing mainly non-traditional apprenticeships in the US. if we can go to the slides, if we can, yeah. So just very briefly, these are as president of TranZed Apprenticeship Services, which is a central brand. I'm also, I would suppose, be president of these other three organisations that you see. The two on the right, the Apprenticeships for America and apprenticeshipblog.com, are mainly about sharing information and gathering impetus across the US around the message and the development of apprenticeships as a workforce methodology to get more people into sustainable jobs. I will very briefly at the end touch on the Open for Apprenticeship brand, because that is something that is developing quickly and might be of interest to some of the people on there. So I'm going to spend just the next couple of minutes just giving you sort of a quick overview of how we got here and what we're doing, and then I'll talk about the British model. Next slide, please. So I came over in 2014 after President Obama's State of the Nation speech, where he talked about, wanting more apprenticeships in the US. And at the request of the US DOL, I was asked to come over and start to see how we could translate some of the European and Asian models to the US. Next slide, please. So this slide just represents something that I want to really make clear, is that when I came over, everybody thought that coming from the UK and Europe, we'd have all the answers about apprenticeships. For those of you that know anything about UK apprenticeships or have looked at them, it's a system that isn't sort of sustaining very well now, because it was completely funded by the government. So I don't want to be seen as the person who's going to tell you I have the panacea for all of the problems around apprenticeships and retail, because we don't have all the solutions. UK, Europe work in a completely different culture to what the US is. So we at TranZed and everybody that we work with realizes that you don't need a British model, you need a US model that's specific to the culture and the businesses within the US. So I just wanted to get that out up front. Next slide, please. So this is a newspaper cutting from the UK many years ago, when the UK was roughly in a similar position to the US. This is TranZed's strategy. This is what we are here to do. We are completely focused on supporting what we believe is an apprentice revolution, not just for the communities and people who need to get in sustainable jobs, but also for employers, and that's our complete focus. Next slide, please. This is just a very brief overview of the timeline of TranZed. All the way from 2014 to now to 2019, we are registered in 5 states. Currently, we are working with the state of California and the state of Missouri to look at how we develop that. You'll see Purdue University Global's logo on the bottom there, because one of the things that we believe should happen across all apprenticeships is that there should be a clear and defined route to college credit. We are working with Purdue University Global at the moment to articulate all of our apprenticeships so that anybody who does an apprenticeship with TranZed can get college credit for doing that apprenticeship. And we're hoping that will be expanded to all other apprenticeships as well. Next slide. But we have to be prepared, because it is a hard slog. It is a lot of work. So all that's saying is that, if you're getting into apprenticeships, be prepared to do the hard yards. Next, please. This is when you talk about apprenticeships, I suppose, what people imagine. Neither of those are me, by the way, as an engineer, just to make that clear. But that's the type of apprenticeships that people think about in America when you talk mainly about apprenticeships. Next. So in America, there's 3 types of apprenticeships, just a whistle-stop tour: time-based programs, competency-based, and hybrid. At TranZed, we run the hybrid methodology, because we don't believe that if somebody's in a job for 2,000 hours and does 144 hours classroom instruction, that they are necessarily going to be competent at what they do. It's not a time is not definitively saying you're going to be great and have the competencies that the employer wants. So we run a hybrid model where our basis is time-based, so that employers have a framework within which they can work and understand. But competency-based is we collect evidence of competency to prove that the apprentice can actually do their job. Next. So 5 key components, and this is where I'm going to start and make some comparisons to the UK. You'll find that in the UK, the underlying sort of ethos of an apprenticeship is the very same. Employer involvement. You don't have an apprenticeship without an employer, and you really shouldn't have apprenticeship standards or apprenticeship programs without an employer having an input. That's the same as in the UK. Structured, supervised on-the-job training. Because in the UK, mainly the apprenticeships are all competency-based. They don't have hours. By law, in the UK, you have to have at least 12 months in an apprenticeship. Related instruction, there is a 20% of the amount of time that somebody is on apprentice has to be, guided learning hours has to be done in the classroom, and it can't be done in the workplace in the classroom. It has to be done off-site. But that's a lot less than 144 hours usually. And rewards for skills gained, that's a bit up in the air in the sense of that there is 2 minimum wages in the UK. There is a minimum wage for an adult over 25, and then there is a minimum wage in the UK for an apprentice, which generally runs about $8 an hour. So you can see how that is a big difference for employers, especially in the retail sector, where the wages at entry level tend to be low anyway. Where in the US there is a relatively higher minimum wage, and it is a starting point that is difficult sometimes to get over. And not national occupational standards. In the UK, all standards and all apprenticeships are monitored and run by third-party certifiers. So they have to be externally run and externally certificated. Next, please. This is what we tell. This is what the UK tells apprentices, and I'm sure you can see some of these that are relevant in the US market. You get paid for the job. You don't just get one qualification. You'll make friends. You'll learn new skills. In the UK, you could earn college credit. It's still a big gap. There isn't parity between apprenticeships in the UK and degrees and college credits, and there isn't a real structure to do that. In fact, the US is probably a little bit ahead on that in that world, which is great. You're working full time. Some people don't realize that an apprenticeship is a full time job even now, but it has to be. You can be any age to do an apprenticeship, apart from it starts at 16 in the UK. Right up to, I can remember when I had my apprenticeship business, we had people who were in their 70s doing an apprenticeship. So it's any age. You don't pay tuition because all of the apprenticeships in the UK are funded by the government in general. So that's another big thing. That's the cultural difference, is that the government pays for apprenticeships to be delivered. And you might not even have to go to college. And that statement is in there because employers see apprenticeships as a skill-based program, and as long as the apprentice has the skill at the end of it, they don't care whether they have a college degree or not. Next, please. Very briefly, advantages to the employers, same as the UK, helps business develop highly skilled employees, increases retention, direct cost savings, diversify the workforce, and gives company edge over the competition. That's a big one in the UK because people recognise apprenticeships, and they want people to do apprenticeships to be part of their business. Please. So as you can see there, the 83% of the starts in apprenticeships are in these areas. And as you can see, retail and commercial enterprise, which includes hospitality, and I'll briefly tell you about that in a second, 54,000 people start in those occupations in the UK. But you can see also that the 83%, there's only one traditional route in there, engineering, manufacturing. There's 111,000 starts per year, 30% of all the starts, and 54% between that and public service. So the service sector, non-traditional, is really high in the UK. Next, please. So these are the things that come under retail. All of these areas: barbering, beauty therapy, carrying, delivering goods, cleaning and support services, all of those things that you would see, and some of them that you would not necessarily see as retail at first sight. So wind storage is part of retail. So underneath that occupational standard in the UK, all of these things fall. So you'll probably recognise some of those that everybody's involved in, and not recognise the others being bundled into that sector. Next, please. 3 levels. Important in having retail as a career ladder rather than just an entry-level post. There is a career ladder that people can go through. So there is entry level, which is intermediate, sales assistant, beauty consultant, customer service assistant, stock room. And then you can move from that to the advanced level, which is senior sales assistant, working in a craft expert in a bakery, advisor, merchandiser, all of those sort of things. And then a higher level, regional manager, area manager, store manager, department manager, supervisor. Every apprenticeship in the UK tends to have this career ladder built in so that people can start at the entry level and see clearly how they can move through the job, move through in the retail sector, and that helps retention. People see it as a career and not just a stopgap job. And I'm glad that we're going to hear from people who've been working with McDonald's, because McDonald's do that really well in the UK already, which is great. Next slide, please. This is one of the key things that I just wanted to highlight, is that UK standards are built around knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So the behaviours one is one that we very rarely hear in the verbiage with regards to USA apprenticeships. We learn about knowledge, which is the stuff that's transferred in the classroom. We hear about skills, that's the competencies built in the workplace. But behaviours are always the things that employers tell us that they can't get in some of the employees. It is baked into the UK system. Next, please. These are the retail knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So you can see dealing with customers, business, financial, marketing, communication, sales, and promotion. All of the things that you would expect to be in a retail apprenticeship. And I know this is just a whistle-stop tour, but that gives you a feel of what happens in retail and the type of skills, knowledge, and behaviours that they expect. The next slide is, if you could move on, is a guy who works for Aldi. You know, we have Aldi in the US. Aldi is a German company, so you can imagine that they are steeped in the apprenticeship culture. So this is a story about Adam. You know, Adam has moved from a entry that goes to an entry level right through to being a manager, and Aldi tend to pay quite well as well. So he's taking this as a career, and by the end of the third year, he's managing a whole store. You know, in the UK, I don't know what the salary is in the US, but in the UK, managers of Aldi stores can earn upward of $80,000 a year, and that just shows you the career ladder and how they go. If you go to the next slide, please, you'll see the other area of retail that is bundled together. It's hospitality. So, you know, so hospitality catering sits outside, but so it's retail, hospitality, customer services, and retail enterprises. So again, you'll see some of the things that are similar to the retail one, but then you see some of the knowledge and behaviors around food and beverage service, barista, guest services, housekeeping, reception, reservations, events, and food production. Not food production is more about assembling of food, which sounds strange, rather than actually cooking and being chef. So anything that's not a chef falls into this same retail aspect. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's another example of Amy, who was working in a guest house, you know, or a bed and breakfast, but it was a pretty big guest house. It's more like a small hotel. It's just talking about how she did all of those jobs and then found the one that she felt more comfortable with, and is building a career in the retail and hospitality sector through starting out and learning all of those cumulative skills that give her what she needs. And then we've got just a couple more slides. So the next one, very briefly, I do want to touch on Open for Apprenticeships. Open for Apprenticeships is a toolkit that we've developed within TranZed based on not only our experience in the US, but the experience that we've had in different parts of the world. It's a toolkit of how to explain and engage with employers about getting them on board to be part of the apprenticeship movement, especially in non-traditional routes. And many employers, you know, start off with 4 years school and 3 years experience for the jobs. What this toolkit helps them to do is to realize what type of business they need to be, realize how they need to formulate the job descriptions, and clearly shows what the expectation is of them if they want to get involved in apprenticeships. We're finding this helps with engaging employers, and we are now being engaged by various states across the US to train all of their workforce boards, train state staff in this toolkit to ensure that there's a consistent message going out to employers who at first sight may not recognize apprenticeships as being a workforce tool. So we're really excited by that, and that's something that we are, as you can hear, we are trying to get people involved in and get their comment and get them to sort of be involved in using that. And then finally, I think I've just about stuck to 15 minutes, which is a first for me. Any questions?
Thank you, Paul. While we wait for some of the questions to roll in through the chat function, I have a lot of questions also. And so one of the things that you mentioned was the salary level for Aldi. So that was surprising to me. But is there a corresponding conversation on the employer end about sort of job quality apart from just salary? So do those things come with, how do employers frame the position so that it's applicable or appealing to employees?
Yeah, I think what you know, when I talked earlier on about there being a cultural difference, one of the things is that, and I know this sounds really sort of hard-nosed in one sense, but when you get a workforce methodology embedded into a system in a culture, what happens is that it's seen as one of the various routes that people will take in. So people will gravitate to doing that job. The employers don't necessarily need to make it sound as appealing as you would have to in the US, because it's seen as one of the core functional methods of getting into work when you leave school, if you are not going to go to what we call sixth form, which is higher education, or into a community college or college. So there is a known understanding of that. To get on this career ladder, the only route I may have is an apprenticeship. So employers can be really choosy about who and how they take people, and it is generally sold through the government sells it as a mechanism to get into work and get an education and skills and a real job and getting paid from day one. What I would suggest people do is, if you just search on Google UK apprenticeship marketing and advertising, you'll see some of the great advertising that the government does, and that tends to generate appeal. There's one called Get In and Get Up, and that shows people working for IBM and all of those sort of people. So I mean, that to understand the concept of what it means to start an apprenticeship when you leave school at 16, you really need to look at some of that marketing and how they engage it. But employers see it as as a route that will help their business. But to be fair, they do see it as a cheaper than a full-time adult coming into this job, because we would have to pay them higher. It's just an accepted route in the UK. And that doesn't mean to say that I agree with that being the case, but it is an accepted cultural route.
That's helpful. Thank you. And so one question did come through on the chat, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more towards pre-apprenticeship programs in the UK, and if that's a thing, and if not, sort of how you think they would fit to this model.
Yeah. Okay. So pre-apprenticeships is something that gets called very different things in the UK, and what they try to do is they try to call it something that does appeal to people, and it tends to be. We have a program called Life Skills in the past. We have a program that is youth apprenticeships, but it's not like in the US. We work with a lot of people who are sponsored pre-apprenticeships through TranZed, because it has to be linked to a registered apprenticeship program. Now that is a bit of the piece that's missing in the UK. You can run a pre-apprenticeship or a life skills program, or a step up to retail, or a step up to tech, or whatever people want to call it. And you can run it without it being connected to a registered apprenticeship route in the UK, because they see it as an independent program. So what happens is that in general, you get people who join these programs, and it's a bit like a revolving door. They will try hairdressing, they will try retail, they will try engineering, they will try something, but never find the connection to get into a real job, because you don't have to be employed to do that pre-apprenticeship route. In the US, there's many things in the US that has been done right, and one of them is making sure that there is a direct connection where possible between a pre-apprenticeship route and a registered apprenticeship route, so that there is clear links and interventions going on to make sure that this is not a revolving door of more empty training programs that isn't going to get people into jobs in the end. So it is a bit more loose in the US. I do think US has it, but there is not as big of an intern system in the UK. So, for instance, retailers in the UK tend to take people on what they would call a pre-apprenticeship rather than an intern program, because they don't have to pay people on an intern program or pre-apprenticeship, but they get them to do real work, and it's more long. It's a more long process. But again, the providers that deliver that pre-apprenticeship get paid by the government for doing that. So.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I would argue that there's definitely some examples of that in the U.S. too, with retailers taking on young people, not an apprenticeship pathway, but to pay them a little bit less. So can you talk a little bit, I mean, I recently read a book about how retail in the UK and really all across Europe is not necessarily considered the low-wage job that it is here in the US. So can you talk a little bit about the differences in the sector overall between the two places?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange because you'll see retailers who are the same retailers in the US that we have in Europe in the UK, and they have a very different approach to the training and the development of the talent pool that is going to go into their stores, not just as sales assistant and customer service advisors, but they will see it as a process by which they can identify people who will be all-rounders, and they will be able to bring them through the ranks. You know how I spoke earlier about those 3 different levels? Employers in retail tend to start off with that opinion that, you know, if I can find somebody who I believe has the ability to be a store manager in 2-3 years, then I will invest time, energy, and support in taking them from an apprenticeship all the way through to that point. But again, I've got to go back to this point that is really important. It's easier for an employer to do that if the government is going to pay for the training. It is a very different dialogue between taking people on and then in the hope that they would make a manager's post in 3 years, when an employer is having to dip their hand in their own pocket. I just want to clarify that I'm saying that I believe that the US model has got it right, and I'll give you an example just live from today in the UK. Is that we have an a retailer called Halfords in the UK, which is I suppose it's a bit like AutoZone in the US. They've been taking on sort of 600 apprentices a year. They have hundreds and hundreds of stores. The government has cut the amount of money that they will be paid for the entry level apprenticeships, and what they've done now is made redundant half of their training staff, and they're reducing from 600 to 300 apprenticeships because they can't make it work financially. My argument is that if you're developing your own talent pool for the future, you should be able to be dipping your hand in the pocket and share the burden and the cost of that. So America, starting from a very limited amount of funding, in my mind, is the best route to go, because funding dictates culture, funding dictates pace, funding dictates the quality of the program. And I think, you know, it's going to take longer for America to build that culture strongly, but it will be more sustainable, more strong, and have more value in the end than a program that is paid for by somebody else. I mean, if you do a search for Halford's apprenticeship program on Google, you'll see that today they've just made that announcement, and their reasons is just a financial reason, not a talent pool, not a staffing, not a workforce, just money.
Interesting. Thank you for that. And so one other question I had for you is that what is the involvement of sort of third parties or intermediaries? In the U.S., and a lot of the folks that are on this call are basically occupying that space, and they're sort of helping to foot the bill or to subsidize some of the costs that employers would get or would accrue for putting together an internship or a pre-apprenticeship program. I'm sorry, apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship program. So what is that role in the UK, or is there a comparable role?
Okay, so intermediaries in the UK, there is 2 people who run apprenticeship programs in the UK: community colleges and intermediaries. I mean, TranZed's an intermediary in the US. But so like, for instance, if I was registering a retail apprenticeship with Maryland State, I would develop the work processes, develop the curriculum, and register it with the state, and I could be a group sponsor, find vacancies that an employer has, and deliver the training, manage the hours, manage the OJT, and then tell the government and the state that this person has passed their apprenticeship. In the UK, the intermediaries do exactly the same as that, with the delivery and the engagement and the sort of the management of the apprenticeship, but they don't have any control over the quality assurance of the certification, they have to live and work by the rules of the third-party certifiers. So they have to have external verification of the quality assurance. They have to collect the competency and the evidence of competency, and then have that verified by an external verifier, where in essence, the system currently, once you've become a sponsor and you've gone through registration, the government and the state tends to leave you alone to deliver what you deliver, and everybody hopes that the quality assurance is there. And I think, you know, that's the big difference. There is still a lot of intermediaries. There's a third-party certifier that tests the quality, and also a government agency that can turn up with immediately just turn up out of the blue and do a full inspection of your provision and close you down if they don't think that you are delivering a high enough quality of delivery and progression for learners and all of those sort of things. So intermediaries are big. It's the way that apprenticeships are run in the UK, but it's far tightly monitored and quality assured.
Thank you. So I have one final question, and then we'll move on to Tanille, and then any other questions that come in, we can go ahead and post on the community of practice. But you talked a little bit about some of those soft skills being baked in, and of course that's what we hear far and wide as well, is that a lot of these folks can be trained, but they're missing those soft skills that they need to really be successful. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about how they're baked in, maybe some of the nuances there?
Yeah, so every apprentice that's registered in the UK, like I say, is managed by a third-party registration certification organization that is a bit like a higher education commission in each state, but they are private companies that do this and are sort of not funded by the government. They are private companies that sell their services to intermediaries. And every apprenticeship standard has the same way of working. They have mandatory units that everybody has to do as part of the apprenticeship, then electives that are chosen to tailor the apprenticeship to suit the employer's needs that the apprentice is going into. Part of those mandatory units is math, English, communication, working with others, and IT. So there is 5 areas that are mandatory. So for instance, if I in the UK, we don't have such thing as a high school diploma. We sit final exams in the UK. So if I don't have an exam in math, I would have to do math as part of my apprenticeship and pass a standard test that would be equivalent to some of the math that you would do at high school. But I mean, there is built into that working with others, communication, and within that there is the skills of, you know, turning up on time, all of those skills that employers sort of don't think people have. But, you know, when we talk about pre-apprenticeships, there is a pre-apprenticeship in a program before that, which changes its name every 5 minutes in the UK. But they do a lot of work around those soft skills and those essential work skills earlier on in the process. But if somebody comes and it really wants to work into retail and is really keen to get a career in retail, an employer will take those because they know that the apprenticeship, any issues that they have around working with others and communication, that the apprenticeship will help them deal with that to get this person up to scratch and be able to do those skills as well. So it's mandatory in apprenticeships in the UK.
Fantastic, thank you. That's a really interesting way of proceeding, especially having that standard across. So thank you so much. Any other questions that come in, I'll shoot you via email, or you can find on our website, and then I'll have everybody else find them on our website or on our community of practice. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and transfer over, seeing how we're just about time, to Tanille. Let's see. Before I pass it off to Tanille, I just want to remind everyone again that if you have any questions during her presentation, please feel free to submit them using the chat box function. And then, yeah, I can go ahead and queue them up for Q&A. So Tanille, I'm going to pass it off to you now.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Paul. That was very interesting. I took a lot of notes, so I might be reaching out to you with some questions. So we can move to the next slide. You did a great intro. So I'm from Skills for Chicagoland's Future, and on the next slide we talk just a little bit about who Skills is and what we do. So we work with the underemployed and unemployed on most of the west and south sides of Chicago and getting them into jobs. As you can see from the slide, we've placed over 6,000 and actually over about 6,200 individuals into jobs. And we kind of do it a little bit differently. As Paul said, you know, the employers are the foundation to the apprenticeships, so are they to the work that we do here at Skills. And so we work with our employer partners. We have over 70 employer partners that we work with to find out their hiring needs, and then we go out and find the candidates. So we don't have a caseload or anything like that. We kind of reverse engineer a staff and agency model, and it has resulted in over 6,200 placements. We also have done an independent study, and as you can see here, about if you are placed through us, it's an average of an increased wages of $61.20 per year is possible, just based on those relationships that we do have with the employer. Next slide, please. So here, what we're here to talk about today is what we call our Pivot to Success Beacon programs. And this program that we're currently doing with McDonald's is what we look at is kind of a three-pronged approach to success. And it really starts with the job and career pathway. And we'll go into that in a little more detail on future slides. But we work with the employers to set up, you know, what is that entry-level job that would be available to our opportunity youth, you know, between the ages of 18 and 26. And then we look past that first entry-level job to develop a program that could get them to that second job, that third promotion, and so that it really is a career pathway for them. The McDonald's program also has a college education component where they are going to Harold Washington City Colleges here in Chicago to get a retail and business management degree in a cohort approach. So they go through the classes together. We do block scheduling to allow them to also have the amount of work hours necessary to support themselves financially. And the third, final and very important part of our program is guidance and support. A little bit later, towards the end of my presentation, I will talk about how an individual gets selected for this program, and the skills staff provides a lot of guidance through that process. As well as we have 2 mentorship opportunities that are built into our program. First, we work with an external mentor, so our youth have the opportunity to talk to an external mentor about anything that they so desire, work-life balance, childcare issues, things like that. And we also work with the McDonald's owner-operators to provide an internal mentor. And so this is someone that can help them navigate the workplace culture, maybe answer questions they don't feel comfortable going to their manager about that may be something they should have remembered from orientation. But this allows kind of that full cycle and full circle of support. Next slide, please. So this is diving in a little bit deeper to our McDonald's program. They do start out as a crew member, and that is their first step on their journey. They will do customer service, operations. Each owner-operator has an onboarding and orientation procedure so that they are learning all different areas of the restaurant. This is a management track. We're hoping that they get to the store management level. And so they do need to fully understand all the different components of their location, of the restaurant, in order to be able to move up on that career pathway. And then, as I was saying before, the college education piece is a retail management associate's degree from Harold Washington. And they will be taking classes year-round, 6 to 12 credit hours, depending on the semester during the program. McDonald's is very committed to the participants focusing on school. And so one of the great parts about our program is that not only is McDonald's paying for the associate's degree, but the participants also receive a stipend while they're attending school. So they don't want them to have to decide between picking up another shift and going to an English class. They are also getting paid while they are in school, as well as receiving a study bonus if they perform well at midterms and at finals. So that's very exciting. And then the guidance and support, as I said before, we try to create that guidance and support in a cohort atmosphere. We do professional development sessions once a week that are either led by skills staff, the mentor partner, or also the education partner, so that they're getting those soft skills that we were just talking about, as well as study skills and things that also help them be successful in their education endeavors as well. Next slide. So this is a little bit about the career pathway. And what I'm showing you here today is a lot of what we actually show our participants as part of our screening process. And so this shows all the different opportunities. And our program is 2 years, and we're going up to about that general manager, right in the middle of the golden arches there. But there's also opportunity outside of the restaurant. And what we hope that our participants understand is that some of the opportunities could be in accounting or marketing, or you name it, outside of the restaurant. And McDonald's is also committed to that success as well. And so once our program ends, they will have opportunity at further tuition reimbursement through the Archways to Opportunities program. And so that is there for them to get their bachelor's degree, to even further their education past that, so that they can even go further up the career ladder, either with McDonald's or outside of McDonald's. Next slide, please. So this is an amazing program. I hopefully after my presentation you agree, but we definitely want to make sure that these opportunity youth are ready for this opportunity, that they are open and willing, that they are committed and determined. And so this is just a very high overview of our process. Our screening process is anywhere from 30 to 45 days that we spend with a candidate. My Skills Youth team works with the candidates to determine if they're a fit for the program. And so these are just some high-level areas that we look at: their program eligibility. They attend an information session similar to what I'm doing today. And then we look to make sure that they are the candidate profile, that they're ready for the job, that they would be successful on the job. We also do education readiness that will include placement testing, different kinds of surveys and things to make sure that looking at their past educational history as well as their educational goals. And then we look at program readiness as well. That's a lot of those soft skills, persistence profiles, things like that. And prior to presenting them to the employer does make the final decision on who is welcomed into the program. We do an internal audit and panel as well, to make sure that we are presenting the candidates that will be most successful in this program to the employer. Last slide. Questions, thoughts?
Thank you so much, Tanille. So I do have a couple of questions that came through. First one, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about funding, sort of what are the various inputs for funding? I realize you mentioned that McDonald's, for instance, is providing additional supports for school after they complete their associates and after they've been working at the management level. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about that and the various streams coming in.
So for this program, it is fully funded by the employer. So they pay for the education, professional development stipends, as well as educational stipends. So this Beacon program is fully funded by McDonald's.
Thank you. Another question that came through is what happens to the young people who are below and sometimes well below the eligibility criteria?
So that is an excellent question. So we, because Skills is a more than just these youth programs, and I alluded to it a little bit at the beginning, we do several placements. So whenever we have someone that maybe is not qualified for the full Beacon program, we try to generate our own pipeline to future Beacon programs, but we also can place them in other opportunities, whether with McDonald's, but just not in the Beacon program, or with other employers that we work with as well, to get them on the job, getting some additional on-the-job training, as well as we work with community partners and different workforce readiness to continue to give them those skills that they need so that they could be eligible in the future.
Fantastic, thank you. Could you talk a little bit, I know that you've had one cohort already go through and you're starting another cohort, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, could you talk a little bit about what the demographics of those folks that are going through the program, have already gone through the program, and what you're seeing now?
So we have, we are in our first semester of school for our first program. So we're only, about 4 months in. And we are working primarily with youth 18 to 26. Our average age is actually 22. And they're from all different areas of the Chicagoland area. We have a lot of different ethnic diversities as well throughout that program, and actually a pretty good mix of men and female in that first cohort. I would say our second cohort is shaping up to look more female dominated than male dominated this time, but a very diverse group of individuals. And we even have those who have recently graduated high school, those who have no college whatsoever, and then those who have attempted to go to college and have been unsuccessful on their own. And so we're hoping that they are more successful with these additional supports.
So one other question came through. The question is, has there been any conversations about on-ramps or off-ramps mid-process for young people that have a clarity or pivot point in their desired career path?
That's an excellent question. So the person that asked that question, do you have an example of something that may have kind of alluded to them wanting to make a change, or because I probably could speak more to the specifics.
So we're unmuting folks right now so they can ask
Perfect.
questions fluidly. So the clarity that I got is that they start any manufacturing path and they hear about something else, or vice versa.
So that's a great, so we are very, within our Beacon program, so the youth that we talk to, we're very clear about what the pathway looks like, where they're at. However, we do understand that people do kind of change, mid-route. And so we actually make sure that our program is kind of robust and that screening process is long, so that we have plenty of people during that process that say, I'm not sure this is for me. One of the things that we do believe truly is making sure that our youth are also aligned with a good exit strategy. So if you're working with an employer and you decide it's not a good fit, or you would like to start something new, how you exit is just as important as how you start. And so there is, as far as our own policies, we look at a case-by-case basis. If someone sees something that they would like to transition to, we work very closely with our employers and have those conversations and work with our youth to determine if we're able to transition them to a different program. But a lot of that has to do with the youth and the conversations that the youth are having with the employer themselves. Does that answer your question, Adam?
Great, thank you. So one other question, I noticed the header persistence profile in one of the slides. Kenny, I don't know if you could back up just a couple of slides, right there actually, in terms of additional steps. Can you talk a little bit about what that persistence profile is, or what goes into that?
Absolutely. So there's a number of different components. So we look at previous educational success, placement test scoring. We have in our interviews, we're really looking for two different things. So our TALs, our recruiters, meet with the youth several times, and they are asking questions that relate to more of those soft skills, conflict management, your why, a time where you have struggled in a situation, how did you overcome that, your greatest achievement. So we're asking questions that maybe are not always asked in a regular interview. And we create a score for that, as well as one for, the candidate profile, what people are looking for to be hired on the job, what the actual managers or assistant store managers are looking for. And then the other thing that goes into that is program readiness. So we have a program manager who is responsible for persistence and retention. And so we ask some intake questions, and if there is something that we're looking for that may affect persistence, she'll sit down and talk with them. And what it also does, which is incredibly important for us, is it allows us to understand what kind of supports that the individuals need once they are entered into the program. So they, for instance, in one of our a different cohort, but one of our programs, we realized that transportation was going to be an issue, that these individuals had not been working, but yet were going to have to use public transportation to get to their jobs. And so we were able to work with our funders to provide transportation passes throughout the duration of the program. And so the goal of the persistence profile is dual purpose. It's really to provide those supports once they're in the program as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And one other question that I know some of the sites that are just starting on the apprenticeship path or work-based learning path are wondering is in terms of employer engagement. Can you talk a little bit about how this partnership came to be, and if there's, now how is the response with the various McDonald's franchisees, and also if there's additional folks kind of looking to join this group?
Great. So the actual initial conversation has been going on for a very, very long time prior to my engagement here and my employment here at Skills. McDonald's itself has a youth opportunity initiative that, America's Best First Job. And so they are very committed to the population in Chicago and internationally as well. And so this was an opportunity to really impact Chicago's youth here. And this is something that Skills was passionate about as well. And so we partnered up and developed this program, but it's been in the works for a very, very long time. And the owner, as far as your second part of your question, is we initially started working with 5 owner operators. So these are individually franchised owners. And so we work with McDonald's Corporation, but the owner operators kind of opted into this and were committed to this on their own. And so we work directly with the 5 owner operators. We have received a positive response. There are other owner operators that are interested in participating in the program. Since we are only 4 months into our first cohort and we're still in our pilot phases, we are staying with the same owner operators at this point. As we've onboarded their managers, we've developed relationships with the different locations. But there's definitely been a positive response in other owner operators that are interested as well.
Thank you so much. Any other questions folks have? Okay. Well, I just want to thank our speakers today. Thank you so much, Tanille and Paul, for taking time out of your busy schedules to talk with us. I do want to highlight of the resource that Paul mentioned, which is Open for Apprenticeships. I've asked for a link, which we can either send out via the chat function, or we'll do that again on the COP. I do also want to flag that JFF has a tool has a service, I'm sorry, not a tool, that they're providing through their Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning, where they'll provide a no-cost and no-obligation consultation to employers. Canny is going to send out that link right now in case you're thinking about starting an apprenticeship program with an employer partner of yours and you think they need a little bit of help on the back end. So you'll see that link on our chat function. It's jff.org/WBL-on-demand. And we'll share with you also the Open for Apprenticeship link once we get that. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And if you have any questions about this presentation or about the speakers or just the work of the National Fund, please feel free to email Canny and myself. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.